Hello, YouTubers, friends, compatriots, bootlickers, shills, death slaves, horse peasants, vassals, minions, meat sacks, appointees. I'm usefully welcome, and let's go to the good old USA and take a close look at Trump's appointments. Now we have a large picture, a broad swath, as they say, of these appointees that Donald Trump is bringing with him to his administration. And I've done a couple videos on this before. There was a little bit of hesitance on my part to characterize a lot of these people that Trump was appointing as the nuts and crazies and fringes that we see them portrayed as in the media. I wanted to give them a fair chance, but now that we see them adding up, it doesn't look too good in a lot of respects, and it makes me nervous, and it should make a lot of people nervous. And even though there was promises of moving away from certain policies, when you look at these appointees, at least it looks like we're going to see a lot of policies that we've seen before. And there's been a lot of charges for a number of these appointments that they're anti-Semitic and Islamophobic and the like. And I want to stay away from that because one man's accusation of being anti-Semite is completely ludicrous to someone else. Those are easy charges to level. And one has to look at each instance of these people discussing these issues to decide whether it truly is anti-Semitic and Islamophobic. Steve Bannon, for example, from a Breitbart Report, who's now a senior counselor to Trump, and he makes a lot of people nervous. But I'm not so uncomfortable with controversial views, and I have different ideas about what constitutes Islamophobia and anti-Semitism. So we'll put those aside. But one of the claims that people are talking about, and that is very true, is that we're seeing a lot of the representation of the 1% and the very, very, even a fraction of that 1%. We have a lot of billionaires and CEOs in going into this administration. And then after all the attacks on the banks and the banker support of Hillary Clinton, of course, we have a number of appointees going into the Trump administration that are bankers, Goldman Sachs alumni of all people. So here we go again. Loading these claims about draining the swamp. As a lot of pundits are putting it, looks like he's filling the swamp back up. But once again, I want to see what happens when this administration gets into office before I make any damning observations. But very interesting bunch of people. So like I mentioned, we have Steve Bannon as senior advisor. We have General Michael Flynn, a national security advisor, who's very controversial and is said to be very Islamophobic. But like I say, I want to caveat that because I don't want to go into those nuances right now. Mike Pompeo is the CIA head. Betsy DeVos is Secretary of Education of the Billionaire. Tom Price is head of the DHHS. Scott Pruitt of the EPA. Putting somebody like Scott Pruitt, who has issues with climate change, head of EPA is kind of interesting. Senator Jeff Sessions as Attorney General, which is very sketchy indeed. I have a lot of problems with Jeff Sessions and looking at his credentials. Anyone would have some concerns. Nikki Haley, who has no experience whatsoever as ambassador to the UN. And then some of these people, all these casualties from the last presidential election, like Ben Carson being head of Department of Housing and Urban Development, whatever. Like I say, Steve Mnuchin, Treasury Secretary. So once again, we have a banker alumni, Goldman Sachs alumni, as a Treasury Secretary. Wilbur Ross, hedge fund manager, I believe, is Secretary of Commerce. Another interesting choice. It just seems like there's going to be a lot of conflicts of interest in a lot of these people. Andrew Posner is Secretary of Labor, and of course, Mad James Mattis is Secretary of Defense. And so one looks at some of these appointments and wonders about this policy that Donald Trump mentioned during the campaign of not getting into nation building and staying away from these foreign entanglements. And yet we have these people that kind of represent that. And then one of the more disturbing people that are being associated with Trump right now is this advisory panel, and it's assembled by Steven Schwartzman, CEO of Blackstone. So that's nefarious enough, and that should send up a lot of red flags to people. In a lot of ways, there should be more red flags about Donald Trump integrating people from Blackstone into the government than some of these other appointments. And the CEOs in this advisory panel include some other nefarious characters, including Jack Welch, Jamie Dimon, CEO of J.P. Morgan, Chase Bank, and Gary Cohn from Goldman Sachs. So very, very disturbing there to see these appointments. And then we have General John Kelly, head of Homeland Security. Once again, this trend to put a lot of military people and generals in the government again, which always makes me a little nervous as well. And then Rex Tillerson is being touted as Secretary of State, former CEO of ExxonMobil. Needless to say, anyone that's been paying attention in the last 20 or 30 years would have a problem with ExxonMobil CEO being in the government, let alone Secretary of State. And then, of course, Carl Icahn, advisor on regulatory overhaul, another interesting choice, another billionaire. But there's a lot of differences of opinion and so-called policies between a lot of these selections, these appointments, and Donald Trump himself. There's a lot of disagreement on foreign policy, a lot of disagreements about debt ceilings, a lot of disagreements about these trade agreements and the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the like, and climate change, and then ideas about intervention and attitudes towards Muslims in the state of Israel. It'd be very interesting to see. There's one camp that suggests that perhaps Trump will harness the experience and connections of these people and forge his own policies, but there's other people that look at these people and think that perhaps Trump might get led by people with their own agendas and their own political viewpoints. And so we'll see what happens. I know one thing we can expect is I would assume there's going to be a lot of turnover. I suspect with somebody with like Donald Trump that doesn't have any government experience, that a lot of these people are going to come and go pretty quick. So we're going to have an apprentice program in the White House as people are fired left and right. I would assume, and I assume there's also going to be some scandals and then also be some resignations and the like, because that just goes with the territory. But I'm not encouraged by these appointments. A lot of them make me nervous. And like I said in previous videos, the assembling a cabinet or a tool shed. But time will tell. I don't necessarily want to demonize any of these people until, like I've said in all these other videos, I'll wait and see. There's a lot of trepidation and there's a lot of irrational fear out there of what's coming. Chances are it's going to be more of the same, unfortunately. But with these appointments, there could be a little drama. And like I say, it's a no man's land. A bunch of billionaires, a bunch of generals, a bunch of insiders, a bunch of bankers, a bunch of rogue elements, a bunch of outsiders who are actually insiders, and insiders who are actually outsiders. Anybody's guess what's going to happen next, but there you have it. Trump's appointments. Who knows? I'm a useful idiot, don't you be one too.